Beyond the veil lie forgotten stories, cities that should not exist, whispers echoing in the dreams of the mad. Welcome to Whispers Beyond the Veil, the Cult of the Seven Shadows. Chapter 1. The Letter from the North. Althamar of Vare was not prone to superstition. He was a devoted scholar of the Library of the Abyss, a place where texts were not merely read but deciphered, like living creatures. He had spent 30 years among scrolls corroded by time and codes that whispered in the blackest hours of night. And yet, when someone knocked on his door that evening with a letter sealed in black wax, his blood froze in his veins. The messenger said nothing. His skin was taut, gray, as if it didn't fully belong to the world of men. He left only a bundle wrapped in stitched leather, sewn with thread of blackened silver, then vanished into the fog. The seal, a broken spiral, a symbol forgotten by most, but not by him. It was the mark of Reagan, his first mentor at the Academy of Darhemul, a man said to have died during an expedition to the Silent Mountains 12 years earlier. Althamar unrolled the parchment. The ink seemed alive, pulsing. The words were few. Come to Garn Luthar. The veil is thinning. I found the entrance. Nothing more, no signature, no date, only a map, drawn in frantic strokes and pigments that smelled of iron and moss. It traced a path rising beyond the Broken Lands, toward a region that appeared on no official map. Garn Luthar. That name. He knew it. Not from any book, but the way one knows a recurring dream. Fleeting, but always there. He sat in silence for hours, the parchment between his fingers. When the pale dawn filtered through the iron grates, Althamar was already on his way. In his journal, he left only one line. If I do not return, seal these doors, and never open them again. He knew he wasn't heading toward a discovery. He was heading toward a memory as old as the world, and perhaps older still. Chapter 2. The Village of Endless Winter. The journey was more a dissolution than a movement. Day by day, Althamar ventured deeper into the white, voiceless heart of the North, leaving behind maps, names, civilization itself. Boundaries blurred, and time bent under the weight of frost. The Broken Lands still loomed, sharp stone ramparts, crevasses like the mouths of buried gods, and bones, too many bones, calcified in ice. But it was the 13th day that changed everything. The silence was no longer the absence of sound, but a living pressure, as if the world were holding its breath, or listening. Garn Luthar materialized suddenly through the snow vapors. It didn't stand out at first, just shadows of slanted roofs and houses bent under the weight of ice. No light, no smoke. It felt more like an illusion than a settlement, a village lost outside of time. He stepped through the threshold of the inn. Inside was dry, too warm, steeped in a sweet stale scent. An old man sat in the shadows, pale eyes fixed on Althamar. He spoke in a coarse voice. The temple has risen. Again, you've come for it, like the others. Althamar stiffened. Others? The old man didn't answer, just took a long sip from an opaque bottle. It was the innkeeper who spoke, a pale woman with cracked hands. Follow the runes, you'll see them in the ice. Don't stare too long, or they'll stare back. Following her directions, Althamar found the path. A mile to the north, half buried in the frost, the temple emerged like a wreck from another age. Its battlements were made of a stone that absorbed light, and around it the ground was carved with glyphs that burned faintly with a sickly blue glow. He felt something tighten inside him, as if some ancient part of his mind were struggling to remember. It wasn't the first time he had seen this place, but it was the first time he arrived awake. Chapter 3. the fractured seal. Althamar waited for dawn, but day never came. Only a shift in the shade of darkness, as though the world had grown tired of pretending there was ever light. Accompanied by a young man from the village, silent, with eyes as lifeless as blackened glass, he made his way toward the temple. The runes in the ice pulsed with every step, as if they recognized the blood in his stride. The guide said nothing, but now and then he turned to look at Althamar, as if to make sure he was seeing what needed to be seen. The temple steps were coated in a layer of ash-colored frost. Each step bore symbols sharp as claws, some identical to those found in the lost grimoires of Karjun, signs belonging to a language older than writing itself. They entered. The cold inside was not natural. It didn't bite the flesh. It gnawed at the mind. Thoughts slowed, crystallized. They saw the seal at the center of the chamber, a disk of metal encrusted in the floor, fractured into 7 shards, each marked with a name impossible to pronounce. The letters weren't alphabets. They were living structures, writhing when looked at for too long. Althamar knelt. He could hear a song, not with his ears, but in his spine. The 7 carvings throbbed in alternating rhythm, like hearts beating out of sync. Behind him, the young man let out a sob. When Althamar turned, he was gone. No trace, no sound, only silence, and that dull echo that seemed to seep from the very walls. And that was when he understood. The seal had not been made to keep something out. It had been etched to hold something in. And now, it was broken. Chapter 4. The voices beneath the stone. There was no panic, only a silent awareness, like water rising slowly past the threshold. Althamar stood alone in the heart of the temple, surrounded by walls that seemed to pulse with life. The inscriptions crawled across the stone, slow as congealed blood, shifting position each time he looked away. His lantern flickered, but not from wind. In the still air, the flame bent toward the walls, as if drawn by an ancient breath. Then came the voices, not as sounds, but as pure impulses in the mind. Memories not his own, fears he had never lived. A mother drowning among stars, an army rotting beneath a timeless sky, a scribe etching his own name in a language that erased him. The walls sang, each word a forgotten truth, each verse a fragment of occult too ancient to be told. Althamar then saw a fresco etched into the living stone, 7 stylized figures, bent in worship before something not depicted. At the center, an empty space. But the more he stared, the more it seemed full, an absence pressing against his skull from the inside. Before time, before form, they walked. The words reached him, from the floor, from the walls, from his blood, and he understood. The cult worshipped not gods, not demons. They worshipped what existed before, the very idea of definition. And deep within that temple, they were preparing its return. Chapter 5. The Ritual of the Eye. Hidden between the cracks of the living stone, Althamar found a manuscript. It was damp but intact, written on tanned flesh, marked with symbols that seemed to breathe. It wasn't a book. It was a relic. He opened it. No known language. And yet the text pressed itself into his mind with absolute clarity. It was as if every word had already been written inside him, coded into his marrow. It described a rite, the opening of the second sight, a way to see what is hidden, to pierce the illusion of the world. There were precise instructions, materials to gather, a drop of one's own blood, a charred bone, and absolute silence. He performed it. He sat at the center of the chamber, lit 7 candles, 1 for each name engraved on the seal. He drew the spiral symbol in his own blood, closed his eyes, and spoke the words. The change was immediate. He felt nothing. But he saw. Reality split open like a rotting shell. The temple was not empty, it was crowded. Presences moved within the shadows, weightless, without form. The walls were made of eyes, the symbols of bone, and around him the 7 figures of the cult hunched over him, unmoving, yet breathing. When he opened his eyes again, the room was the same. But he was not. From that moment on, Althamar saw. Wherever he went, he saw shadows walking where no one stood. He saw the members of the cult still alive, not among the living, but through them. The veil had been torn, and what lay beyond was watching him now. Chapter 6, The Seventh Door. Each step took him deeper. The temple was a labyrinth that defied logic. Stairs that rose downward, corridors that branched from the same point, looping back into themselves. The visions multiplied. Now he no longer knew if he was seeing the past, the future, or the thoughts of something dreaming through him. Then he reached the hall of doors. There were 7 arranged in a semicircle, 6 sealed by sigils that floated like flames of shadow. The 7th, however, was different. It was alive, not made of stone, but of dried flesh, stitched with black thorns. Across the seams, runes written in matter that still pulsed. He recognized it. It was the door of rebirth. He had read of it in the fragment Althamar, one of the lost texts of Mir Nair. It said that those who opened it never returned whole. But the vision of the eye compelled him. The shadows were waiting. He traced his name with a trembling finger across the runes. The tissue parted with a wet moan, revealing a darkness older than night. He stepped through. Inside, reality no longer obeyed. The walls breathed, sounds moved like living things. He saw words feeding on each other, and at the center, a throne built from symbols that should not coexist. Above it, nothing. But that nothing was watching him. Outside the door, he heard the other 6 beginning to open. The shadows were returning. And now they had found their vessel. Chapter 7, The Awakening of the Shadows. When Althamar emerged, the temple was no longer the same, nor was the world. The 6 doors had opened. From their thresholds spilled faceless shapes, walking darkness, ideas that had learned to wear skin. The 7 shadows were not spirits or gods. They were incarnated concepts, hunger without end, knowledge that devours, silence that screams across time. They did not speak, they thought through him. Althamar watched reality disintegrate around him. The village of Garn Luthor had never existed, and yet now it did, because the shadows remembered it. The faces of the villagers cracked like masks, revealing beneath them the true forms of the cult's keepers. The stars above changed course. Some fell. Others turned to look at him. Time folded in on itself. Every instant became simultaneous. Every word a summoning. And in that vortex of lucid madness he understood. He was not a witness. He was the last member. He had been prepared his entire life. Every text read, every dream, every silence. A door opening within him. The shadows bowed. Not in worship, but in recognition. And in the heart of the temple, where the world had torn open, Althamar spoke the soundless name of the cult. The sky went dark, and something answered. Chapter 8, The Living Text. Althamar returned. But not as he had left. He walked for days, or perhaps centuries, through lands that shifted shape, where the laws of matter bent beneath the weight of the shadow's thoughts. He returned to his cell in the library of the abyss, or what remained of it. The walls were blackened, the pages of books covered in mold that whispered, but he knew what he had to do. He opened his journal. He wrote with the ink he had carried with him. Now, no longer black, but a deep red, like liquid memory. He wrote it all, of the cult, of the 7 doors, of the shadows, of the name that must not be spoken. Each word seemed to breathe. Each sentence shifted as he wrote. Some lines vanished to make room for others. The journal was writing through him. When he closed the final page, he understood. He was no longer just a witness, nor a member. He had become the vessel. The story itself was now the cult. Each reader, an initiate. Each ear that listens, an echo. Each word, a seed. The cult of the 7 shadows no longer needed temples. It had found a new form, in story, and Althamar, the last scholar, became the first living text. If the veil has whispered to you, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. More secrets await you in the dark.